Next on News Talk, AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show with Kevin Doran.
It's Brian O'Neill in for Kevin Doran on today with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Assemblyman Palmesano, thanks for calling in.
Good to be with you again.
We should start out by letting you take a moment to remember former Assemblyman Don Davidson, who died on Saturday.
Yeah, Brian, this is certainly a very sad day for for our area, for our region, for the Davidson family. Don, served our area. He was on the Steuben County legislature. Did a tremendous amount of work as a county official. He also, was one of my predecessors in the state assembly, where he served from 1987 to 1995, and then then Governor Pataki appointed him the New York State Commissioner of Agriculture and Markets at that time. I had the privilege to work for Don Davidson for several months. Back in 1995, he had called me up and asked me if I'd come work part-time for him because of some things going on with the office, and he needs some extra help. And that was certainly a great privilege, and learning a little bit from him. And then, obviously he got the promotion to be our agriculture commissioner, which was just great for our area and great for agriculture in general because he was a true advocate, certainly understood the issue. When I was an intern in 1990, I had the opportunity to ride, back and forth with him to Albany a couple times when we went home for break. That's when I really first got to meet him. Just a great person. Just committed to trying to help the region. Just a nice man. And he will certainly be missed, but he will certainly be remembered for all the wonderful things he did and the advocate he was for our area.
It's a statement that I got from Judge Joe Latham. And Latham noted that Assemblyman Don Davidson was one of the most honest and intelligent lawmakers that he ever knew who went to Albany.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, he's just very bright, very witty. I remember when I was in there, when I was going through, old things and old letters, seeing the back and forth he had with former Governor Mario Cuomo, who obviously, just passed away himself. But I think there was a respect there. But they had their public battles, but he fought for our area. He fought for our region. He believed in what he stood for, and he thought it was important. He took the trust that the people placed in him very seriously, and he just worked hard in doing his best to represent the area. And I was privileged to work for him, and I learned a lot from him. And it's just a very sad day for our area, and for certainly our thoughts and prayers goes out to his wife Valerie and all his children. It's just a tough day for our area, and he was just a wonderful man, and he will be sorely missed for sure.
Moving on to Albany politics, Assemblyman, the top man in the state assembly, Democrat Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, he says he won't allow a vote on the women's equality agenda in the state assembly because the version that the state Senate is sending over to the assembly, the Senate won't put a plank in there that Governor Andrew Cuomo wants in there that would back up the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision on abortion from 1973 that's called codifying. Assemblyman, why does New York State have to have a backup law on abortion?
Well, Brian, first of all, it doesn't. But beyond that, this just shows that the Speaker and the Assembly Democratic majority are playing politics with issues that can impact women. I understand that they want to try to provide that 10th plank of the package, but we just went through an election where this was a focal point of all these elections. In the Senate, especially, and of course it was brought up in many of our assembly races. But instead of the Senate's passing the 8 other bills because one of the provisions regarding some other provisions, orders of protection were passed in a later bill. So the Senate's taken up 8 individual bills minus the abortion provision, which would, if passed, and if we were to pass them individually as well, the governor were to sign them into law, would certainly advance some significant legislation on behalf of the women of our state. Issues like pay equity, issues dealing with sexual harassment, which has been a big issue in our house for sure, with the cover-ups that took place, with the Speaker and the payouts. Why they wouldn't want that to go forward. The human trafficking issue with Amy Paulin my colleague from Westchester, who's been working so hard to try to get this bill passed. And, why wouldn't we want to bring that forward and pass that? Housing and employment discrimination, domestic abuse. We could pass these bills individually and then have an up or down vote on the abortion provision if you want. They didn't do it in the Senate. It's not going to pass in the Senate. So why not at least get what we can get? We can get these 8 other provisions passed that will advance significant policy that would improve the lives of the women of the state, which should be passed. It's just that they want to keep this one abortion, this provision on abortion, and tie everything to that. And in the meantime, delay it for another 2 years because we have to get through another election because it's not going to pass in the Senate. It makes no sense to me. And the fact of the matter is they just say it's codifying Roe v. Wade, but I disagree with it because this is an expansion of abortion. It doesn't take into account when Roe v. Wade happened in 1973, and they just want to go back to that, but it doesn't take into account other cases that came before the Supreme Court, like Planned Parenthood versus Casey, decisions like that, which allowed states to have more limits and things like partial birth abortion to deal with some of those issues. So this is an expansion of abortion rights. This isn't just codifying it, and it would take it out of the hands of doctors and let people who aren't doctors provide abortions. So there's a lot of concerns about this other provision, but we agree there's conflict in there and controversy. But there's no controversy on the other 8 points. So let's get done the 8 points we can all agree on, and advance an agenda that will help the women of the state, and leave the other issue up to the campaign, or leave the other issue till later when one way or another it can be dealt with. But why hold up these other points? I have no idea. It's strictly the Speaker and the Assembly majority saying putting on hold policies that would improve women's lives in the state for political purposes only, and it makes no sense to me, and it's wrong. And it's my hope that the women of the state speak up and let the Speaker know that let's do them individually. Let's get to 8 we can get done, and continue to have the debate over the other provision.
Assemblyman Palmesano, do you think that the establishment Republicans in the state Senate, and establishment Republicans are usually for abortion or could care less about it, do you see the establishment Republicans in the Senate ever caving on this issue and allowing for an abortion provision in the women's equality agenda?
No, I don't. Even when 2 years ago, when it was a shared authority with the Senate Republicans and the Independent Democratic Caucus, the IDC as they call it, where they shared authority, they both had to agree to bring a bill to the floor. You remember the SAFE Act, which was very controversial. Both Senator Scullis and Senator Clyde had to agree to bring that bill to the floor. Senator Scullis didn't agree to bring the bill to the floor. Senator Klein did try to provide an amendment along the way, and it was defeated. And they made it very clear during these elections. I mean, this was a very major campaign issue with all the Senate races that went on. And, and in those races, we won those Senate seats, and the Senate Republicans won those Senate seats. Because people, when you're out there talking to people, you tell them, let's get these other ones done, but the abortion provision is very controversial. It's very, there's debate on both sides. So why, I guess my point is, if you have agreement on 8, there's no controversy over the other 8 provisions. Let's get those done. Let's get, advancements for pay equity, for sexual harassment, for domestic abuse, for human trafficking, housing and employment discrimination. Let's address those issues for the women of the state. There's going to be another election in 2 years. This is going to continue to come up, but there's no way the Senate Republicans are going to let that bill come forward because they made it clear. So, in the meantime, the Speaker of the Assembly and the governor should be pushing this, and let's do these bills individually, and let's get them done so we can advance it, because we can't just keep holding off. In the meantime, people, we could have tougher laws and better issues on the books to protect women, but in the meantime, the Assembly Democrats, the Speaker of the Assembly, want to continue to hinder progress for women because of this abortion provision, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I think it's ridiculous, and it's appalling, and we should stand up and push back, and we're going to continue to do that.
Assemblyman, while we were talking, email came in from Albany. Came in from the Assembly Members Communications Office. It's actually from Democrat Richard Godfrey's office. Godfrey is pushing for single-payer health care in New York State. They've been having hearings, and he wants to have one today in Albany. And hear testimony on this single-payer health care bill so New Yorkers can get universal health care coverage. And wondering, Assemblyman Palmesano, kind of a complicated Obamacare question. How would this, if Gottfried gets this pushed through, A, do you think he can get it passed with the Senate being Republican? And B, if Gottfried does get it passed, what does this do to the current healthcare system under Obamacare?
That's a good question. I guess I'll take the question, do I think it will pass in the Senate? I do not. I don't think the Senate Republicans will take it up. Assemblyman Gottfried, has been a long-time advocate for a single-payer type of system. He's the chairman of the Health Committee in the Assembly, a long-time advocate for it. I just don't, I know he's holding hearings on it. I haven't been to any of the hearings. I know we was a meeting with my ranker on health, and he was talking about being at the hearing. I just don't see it happening, especially with what we have at the federal level now with the Obamacare and how that's playing out. I don't see it coming to fruition, but it's certainly an issue that Mr. Gottfried firmly believes in, and he's going to push it. It's possible that it could come before our chamber. I just do not see it moving along in the Senate whatsoever, in my opinion.
Moving on to a story that was in Monday's New York Post online. It's the story in there that said there's a plan that was in the works to overthrow Sheldon Silver from his post as the head of the New York State Assembly on the Democrat side. He pretty much does control the Assembly, according to many. The story in the Post goes on to say that Canandaigua Assemblyman Republican leader Brian Kolb prevented the coup against Sheldon Silver from happening. Did you want to comment, Assemblyman Palmesano?
Sure. First of all, there was no plan that I was aware of that had the 44 Republicans grouping up with a number of Assembly Democrats to propose any type of coup.
Interesting. It's AM 1480 WLEA. Brian O'Neill on the line with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. We'll talk St. James when we get back. Back on Newsmaker Show, Brian O'Neill in for Kevin Doran. Assemblyman wanted to talk about St. James. Now, technically, Hornell is not part of your district anymore, but it's kind of a no-brainer that you keep tabs on what's going on in Hornell and work with Hornell's Assemblyman Bill Nojay, on any Hornell issues that are really big. And the biggest issue right now for Hornell is St. James Hospital. Anything you can tell us there, Assemblyman?
Nothing really more from a public perspective. I mean, we continue to try to do everything we can, from writing to calling. We've had our conference calls between, Congressman Reed and Assemblyman Nojay, Senator O'Mara, myself, Assemblyman Giglio. We're committed to try to continue to make the case to whoever will listen, whether it's Department of Health, whether it's the University of Rochester, that we need to keep inpatient services there at St. James. I understand, and we understand about the whole point about regional collaboration, but we think regional collaboration comes with regional balance, and it's mind-boggling to me that we're not asking for 120 inpatient beds, but there should be some sort of limited inpatient bed there in the community to take care of those, whether they have the flu or pneumonia or have to have their appendix out, or for someone to have a baby to think that they're going to have to drive to Dansville Hill, or a senior citizen driving to Dansville Hill to go to a hospital. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. And we're continuing to have discussions and talking to individuals. I know as far as the DRSA plan, there's I think pushed back a little bit as far as submitting the plan. But we're gonna continue to make the case because we think Hornell deserves to have inpatient services. I understand the whole issue about financials, but I think these people are going to have to go someplace. And I know a case has always been said that the patient load at St. James is a high Medicare and Medicaid threshold. But what that tells me, Brian, is that means a lot of senior citizens are using the hospital. And it also tells me a lot of people that are less fortunate, who don't have a lot of resources, are using the hospital. So if there's no inpatient service for them, they have to go someplace. They're not just going to go away. And where that burden is going to shift, although it might not shift to the hospital, it's certainly going to put a shift on the transportation of these individuals, whether it be to Rochester or to Wellsville or to Dansville, which is going to put a burden on the city with their ambulance corps. It's going to put a burden that hurt their ability to take care of people in the region, because they're going to constantly be transporting people. And we're united from the federal to the state to the local level with our mayor Sean Hogan and Alderman Buckley and the Chamber of Commerce to continue to make the case of why inpatient services is needed there. And we're going to continue to try to talk to everyone we can and continue to plead that case as long as people will listen to us.
So you're basically saying there that you're for regional collaboration if it's fair and balanced, but it doesn't seem to be balanced as far as being in favor of Hornell and a Hornell hospital goes. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of balance in the idea of regional collaboration because a lot of the Hornell patients would be sent elsewhere to other hospitals.
Wait, absolutely, especially from an inpatient perspective. I mean, I know they have a low census, but this has been I haven't been following the census, but I mean, think about people getting pneumonia or have to have an appendix out, or need certain services or maternity services. I mean, they're going to have to travel. And listen, St. James, I mean, the city of Hornell, the surrounding population of it, the city of Hornell might be 8,000 people, but it serves a bigger population than that. And Hornell is the only area, when you talk about Dansville and Wellsville, if you want to use those as the other smaller regional operations, Hornell has it's the only one with a professional fire department, professional police department, professional ambulance corps, a major international manufacturer in Alstom, which I think would certainly have a vested interest in helping to advocate to keep inpatient services there. It certainly would have a major economic impact to the Hornell area if we were to lose inpatient services there when you talk about recruiting and bringing in talent for any type of organization. So I think, and this is a community-driven operation. I mean, you can't go on any street corner in Hornell and not see one of the Save Our Hospital signs. I think I heard in the neighborhood 14,000 people signed petitions in less than a month. There's a great support for the community to keep the inpatient services there. And you think about the doctors who have provided such incredible care to the people of the community over the years. I think it was Dr. Collins, I think, said it at the public hearing meeting when they had the public meeting. If doctors aren't going to be able to practice their craft because they aren't able to practice procedures that you would normally practice, you're not going to recruit physicians to the area to take care of people. And I think there's a lot of concern out there about that. And those are the cases we're going to continue to make. It's problematic because they have to put a plan on the table that includes inpatient services. We're hopeful the Department of Health pushes back. We're hopeful the University of Rochester recognizes the need for inpatient services in there, and that's what we're going to continue to make the case to everyone who will listen.
We're down to just about 3 minutes here on the Newsmaker Show talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano on the issue of fracking. After the ban came in a few weeks back, the ban from Albany on hydrofracking, Congressman Tom Reed in Washington stated that he wanted to do something from Washington to undo the fracking ban in New York State. Wondering, have you talked with Congressman Reed on this? Because he and Congressman Chris Collins, the Livingston and Erie County congressman, they've both been very outspoken on fracking and want it to happen in New York State somehow.
I haven't talked to him specifically about that issue. I remember him making that comment, and probably because we're just all starting up our legislative sessions. I think that decision, without question, Brian, was a political decision. I do not think it has anything to do with the health or well-being of the people of the state. I don't think it was based on the science, because look, 35 other states are doing it. The regulations that were drafted for review and commented on.
Review and comment on.
Yes, yeah, they reviewed it and they put out the regulations out there, and they received thousands of comments on. But those regulations in and of themselves were the strongest in the country when it came to that issue, and they would have been stronger after the comment period and things were done. To take into account the court case that happened with the Court of Appeals, which basically shifted it to local control to make a decision at the local level whether fracking could happen or not. Now the state's superseding that on their own, saying it can't be done. And, the fact of the matter is, Brian, is the southern tier needs some opportunity. The southern tier needs, growth. I mean, we're hurting in the southern tier. And primarily that's where the natural gas exploration and development was going to take place in the southern tier. It was going to take place up in the Finger Lakes. There's a lot of concerns. And I represent the Finger Lakes, and I wasn't a real big proponent of it around the Finger Lakes. But the southern tier is where it was going to be done anyway because of the geology. It's where it's closer to the Pennsylvania border. That's where the shale is the richest for that formation. And it would have created thousands of jobs. It would have brought much-needed tax revenue into our school districts, into our local communities because of our tax structure, the ad valorem tax based on production. And also would have helped us continue with economic and energy independence to be able to provide low-cost power to our businesses and to our homes. How many people heat with natural gas? How much electricity is generated through natural gas? And to be able to provide low-cost power to our manufacturers, because we have some of the highest utility costs and energy costs in the country. we could have helped drive down those costs, which would have made us more competitive with other states and the other regions because of having access to that power. And it's just unfortunate that the governor took a political route rather than a scientific route. He'll never convince me that this was done on health purposes. I think it was strictly a political calculation on his part in case he decides to run for president, and he didn't want to lead. And it's just unfortunate. And but yes, as far as talking to the congressman, I haven't had a chance to talk to them on what they're looking at from the federal level. But really, this decision was a political decision all the way through, in my opinion. It's just unfortunate that we're going to miss this opportunity to develop energy here, which would create jobs and brought much-needed tax revenue into our municipalities and school districts.
Assemblyman Palmesano, one final question. Upcoming budget for Albany. Is there anything big that's going to come out of the budget? Anything you can tell us about school runs? Anything there we should know?
Well, I mean, obviously we always wait for the governor's presentation, which we now are hearing might take place next week, in collaboration with the state of the state. Obviously everyone looks at the education numbers and how that's going to affect our local school districts. From my perspective, from the school side of things, the most important thing we can do is get rid of the gap elimination adjustment, the GEA, as soon as possible. That cut, the big cuts we made back in 2011 and 12, we're still not to the levels we were back in 2008, 2009. I mean, even though we've been increasing over the past few years, that's when we had a huge deficit. I think we're at a chance now where we can get rid of that GEA once and for all. So I'd like to see how that the budget proposal comes out. Instead of spending more money on new programs, let's get rid of that GEA first, before creating new and abundant programs in the education circuit. Let's get rid of that GEA first to help our schools be more competitive, especially most of our schools are low-wealth, high-need school districts, and we need to, our kids can compete with anyone, but we need to put them on a level playing field first. And if we do that, then they certainly will be able to compete and be afforded the education they deserve. And then the other big issue is what's going to happen with the settlement money. And, certainly with $5 billion, that can go a long way. I don't think it should be used for recurring operating expenses, but I do think things like debt reduction and for infrastructure, for our roads, our bridges, our water and sewer, I think would be a prudent use of those funds because it's a one-time expenditure. But I'd like to see some of that money go to our local municipalities through like a formula like the CHIPS program, which allows them to have the flexibility to control that money and spend it on the roads and bridges, the water and sewer that they deem appropriate and necessary for the local municipalities, rather than Albany dictating to them how to spend that money.
Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, I want to thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
ABC is next on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.